Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Charity Village webinar. We will get started in just a moment. We just want to make sure that everyone has a chance to join us before we begin the session. We have people tuning in from across the country today, which is excellent. It's so nice to have all of you here. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to today's Charity Village webinar. My name is Mercedes, and I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager with Charity Village. As we are gathering here on a virtual platform, it is important to acknowledge that each of us is joining this webinar from the ancestral or unceded lands of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nation people. I'd like to acknowledge I'm speaking to you from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Anishinaabe, which includes the Ojibwe of Fort William First Nation. Please join us in a moment of reflection as we recognize the Indigenous peoples as the stewards of this land. Let's acknowledge the mistakes and harm in our history and the ongoing injustice, and contemplate tangible actions each of us can take to move forward in a spirit of truth, reconciliation, and collaboration. For those who may be joining a Charity Village webinar for the first time, Charity Village is Canada's largest online job board for the nonprofit sector. In addition to our online job board, organizations can also post volunteer positions. So if you're looking for work or to recruit talent in the sector, Charity Village is a great place to start. We also have a ton of excellent resources for nonprofit professionals, including online courses, articles, fundraising tools, and free webinars like the one we are presenting today. Before we start today's webinar, I would like to quickly run through some housekeeping items. You may have noticed when you joined the webinar that you were automatically put on mute. Since we have hundreds of participants in today's session, it is important for us to minimize the amount of background noise so that everyone can clearly hear the presentation. But you can still ask questions and make comments using the question box at the bottom of the Zoom control panel. Look for that at the bottom of your screen. You can also email your questions to webinars@charityvillage.com. We will be taking questions at the end of the webinar, so please submit your questions as you think of them, and we will do our best to get to as many as possible. If you happen to encounter any technical issues with the webinar, whether it's viewing the presentation or with the audio, please let us know in the question box or by sending us an email. We will do our best to get any technical difficulties resolved as quickly as possible. But in a worst case scenario, please remember that we are recording today's webinar, and we will send you the full recording by email tomorrow. So if you get called away or disconnected, you will still be able to view the full presentation. And with that, I would like to welcome our presenter for today, Jessica Vestergaard, the founder of Written with Purpose.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about how to save time and how to win more grants using ChatGPT. So before I begin, I also would like to start by acknowledging that I am presenting today from the traditional and ancestral and unceded territory of the Coquitlam First Nation. I recognize and appreciate the opportunity to live and work on these lands, and just want to take a moment to reflect on the importance of honoring Indigenous communities. So before we dive in, I just want to take a moment to introduce myself. So hi, my name is Jessica. I am a professional grant writer, and I'm also the founder of Written with Purpose, where I help nonprofit clients win more grants so they can do more good. I've spent over a decade of my career working in nonprofit fundraising, and over the past 2 years alone, I have raised over $3 million in grant funding for my nonprofit clients. My goal today is to share some practical tips with you and make grant writing easier and hopefully a little bit less overwhelming as well. All right, so here is a quick look at what we're going to cover today. So we'll get started by talking about what ChatGPT is, but we'll also talk about what ChatGPT is not. So you have a clear idea of how you can use it to help you with your grant writing. Then we'll touch on some important considerations around privacy and ethics, because making sure your information is secure and used responsibly is a big part of using AI effectively. And then from there, we'll dive into how ChatGPT can help you save time and simplify your grant writing processes. I'll walk you through 6 practical ways that you can use it, from finding funders to drafting and reviewing your proposals. And finally, as a thank you for joining, I've put together a downloadable resource with all the prompts that we will talk about today, so you can try them out for yourself. All right, so let's start with the basics. What is ChatGPT exactly? So in simple terms, ChatGPT is an AI chatbot that uses language processing and patterns in data to generate human-like responses. So you can use it to draft written content like articles, social media posts, emails, and even code. And with that basic understanding, let's move on to what ChatGPT is not, because there's also a few important limitations to keep in mind. So, starting with factual accuracy. So, ChatGPT is not always factually accurate. ChatGPT doesn't have real-time access to current data, so it's really important to double check any facts, statistics, data, or information that it provides. Secondly, it's not always contextually accurate either. So ChatGPT is a writing tool. It is not a subject matter expert. So it can sometimes misinterpret the details of your project or your grant guidelines. So I really like to think of ChatGPT like a calculator. It's only as effective as the instructions and the information and the equations that you give it. So if you put the right information and the right numbers into a calculator, you're going to get the right answer back. But if your input is off or you don't put enough information in, your answer will also be incorrect. And the same goes for ChatGPT. So that's why consulting with experts and your team and your organization and doing your own research is still really important to make sure that your proposal is on point. And finally, ChatGPT is definitely not a replacement for your big, creative, smart brain. So relying solely on ChatGPT can leave your proposal sounding flat and somewhat robotic. So your unique voice and approach and understanding of your project and your passion and your lived experience is really what's going to make your grant proposals come to life for funders. So the goal is really to use ChatGPT to handle the basics and save you time so that you can focus on the parts of your proposal that really need your unique expertise and passion for your cause. Let's also talk about privacy. So first, it's important to avoid sharing any sensitive information like financial details or personal data. It's also good practice to use placeholders where you don't want your organization name to be associated with any information. So for example, here I have, organization name in brackets instead of putting your actual organization name into ChatGPT. Second, if you're using ChatGPT regularly for grant writing, consider a business plan. So this ensures that your data won't be used for training, because the free version of ChatGPT uses your data to learn and train itself, which means it's not entirely private and secure. So you could consider using a business plan if that's something that concerns you. It's also a good idea to enable multi-factor authentication for your account and for any of your accounts. This adds an extra layer of security and protection from unauthorized access. And finally, it's also a good practice before you go ahead and jump into using ChatGPT for your grant writing to read the terms and conditions and ensure that everything lines up with your organization's privacy policies. Every organization has unique privacy policies, and some organizations have specific policies around ChatGPT in general. So it's good to check on those things before you start using ChatGPT. All right, so let's also talk about some of the ethical stuff because while ChatGPT can save you some time, we know that it's really important to use it in the right way. So again, I wanted to really drive home this point about accuracy. So AI can often sound extremely convincing, even when it's completely wrong. So it's always good to double check any facts, statistics, or sources it gives you to make sure they're actually correct. Also, ChatGPT has some biases, and that's because ChatGPT learns from human language and human behavior. So ChatGPT will have biases such as gender bias, cultural stereotypes, assumptions about certain communities. And that's why it's a good idea to read through everything that it generates and make sure that the language is fair, inclusive, and free from any unintended bias. And then finally, let's talk about intellectual property. So AI generated text isn't unique or written in your organization's voice. So to avoid sounding generic or worse, like you've copied somebody else's work, make sure to put everything into your own words. So when we go through to today's session, please keep these ethical privacy and other limitations in mind because, of course, they're a big part of using ChatGPT effectively and responsibly. Okay, so now we've got some of that more heavy stuff out of the way, let's get into the fun part. So how can you actually use ChatGPT to help you in your grant writing? First off, ChatGPT is a huge time saver. So whether you're doing research or drafting your proposal or even working on edits, ChatGPT can help you get things done faster. It also has some pretty impressive writing skills, so it can help you turn your ideas into clear, straightforward language that flows very well. It's also like having an editing personal assistant in your back pocket who is available 24/7 and doesn't judge you for adding a comma in the wrong place for the 100th time. ChatGPT can catch grammar and spelling mistakes quite quickly, so you can polish things off before you hit send on your grants. It's also budget friendly, so you can access quite a lot of its features for completely free and also at a pretty low cost, which is helpful if you're working on a limited budget. And of course, a lot of nonprofits are. So let's dive into some practical ways that you can use ChatGPT to make grant writing a little less overwhelming, especially if you're juggling a lot of things with a small team, which we know many nonprofits do often. So there are 6 main areas where it can really help. So the first here is prospect research. So finding potential funders that align with your programs without spending hours searching online. Second, project management. So helping you keep track of tasks, deadlines, and all those moving parts that come with writing grants. Third, we'll talk about program planning, so brainstorming activities and organizing your ideas so that you can build a stronger case for support. Fourth, we'll talk about statistics and supporting data so that you can back up your proposal with credible information without spending forever trying to track it down. Fifth, drafting your narrative. So taking all those ideas and details about your program and then turning them into a clear, convincing story that really shows your funders why your work matters. And finally, edits and reviews. So catching grammar mistakes and making sure your proposal is polished and professional before you hit submit. So let's break these down one by one and see how you can actually put them to use. Okay, so a lot of my clients tell me that one of the hardest parts about grant writing is finding the grants to apply for in the first place. Prospect research for a lot of folks can honestly feel like trying to find a needle in a haystack, especially if you're not sure where to start. So one way ChatGPT can help is by brainstorming keywords for you. You can use these keywords to get better results in search engines and grant databases. So if you're ever caught yourself just sort of staring at a blank search bar, not really sure what to type, this tip might help save you some time and some frustration. So instead of guessing, you can just ask something like, what keywords should I use to find grants for environmental education? And ChatGPT will give you a list of ideas to work with. So here's an example of what ChatGPT came up with when I went in and asked for keywords for environmental education grants. So what's really helpful is that it doesn't just stick with obvious terms like environment here. You can see that it also came up with eco education grants, climate education, sustainability education, outdoor education, conservation education, and you'll see that it gives you a mix of synonyms and related terms. And by doing this, ChatGPT helps you broaden your search and catch grants that you might have missed if you were only searching for environmental grants. This way, you're not just finding more grants, you're also finding grants that are aligned closely with your program. Another way ChatGPT can help with prospect research is by finding potential funders for you. So let's say you're looking for grants to support mental health programs for youth in Canada. Instead of spending hours searching, you can just ask ChatGPT directly. So for example, you could use a prompt like list funders that support mental health programs for youth in Canada. And ChatGPT will pull together a list of foundations and other funding sources that match. So here's the list of funders that ChatGPT suggested for youth mental health programs in Canada when I typed it in. So some of these are right on track. So for example, Bell Let's Talk and Kindred Foundation, which really do fund mental health initiatives in Canada. But there's also a few that snuck in here that aren't quite so accurate. So you'll see Kids Help Phone is here and Stella's Place. And we know that these are programs that support mental health, not funders themselves, or at least not that I know of. So this is a good reminder that while ChatGPT can help you save time, it's also worth double checking the information to make sure that it's accurate. But even with the occasional mix-up, it's still a helpful way to get a starting list of potential funders. And you can always ask follow-up questions too to narrow things down. So you can ask it to provide a list of family foundations that fund youth mental health in Canada. And that way you're getting more targeted results. And if you're looking for even more resources, I've put together a free downloadable grant calendar with grant deadlines throughout the year. I also, in my newsletter, share monthly grant deadlines. So if that sounds like something that's helpful for you, and you'd like resources for prospect research and a few others, You can find that in my recent article published on Charity Village called 5 Free Grant Research Resources, and we'll put that in the chat for you if that's something that sounds interesting. All right, let's talk about another way ChatGPT can make your life easier, project management. I know what it's like to have a last minute grant pop up on your desk out of nowhere, sort of throwing your whole week off. We have all been there, sort of pulling those late nights, trying to keep track of a million moving parts and double checking every detail to make sure nothing slips through the cracks. So one way ChatGPT can help with this is by creating project management checklists that are customized for each grant's requirements. It can also help you figure out if a grant is even worth applying for in the first place. So you can ask something like, based on these criteria, does this program fit the eligibility requirements for this grant? And you'll get a pretty solid starting point to decide if you should move forward or keep looking. This means that you'll spend less time chasing grants that aren't a good fit and more time focusing on the ones that are. So here's an example of a project management checklist that ChatGPT generated for the TELUS Community Board grant when I pasted in the grant guidelines. You can see it covers all the key details here, like making sure your organization has charitable status, checking if you've received funding from them in the past 12 months, and ensuring that your program supports youth up to age 29. It also includes the practical stuff like eligible regions, documents that you need to attach, and of course, application deadlines, because we all know nothing is worse than going through all this work and missing a deadline. What's great about this is it helps you catch any red flags early on, so you're not spending time on grants that aren't the right fit. Plus, it helps keep everything organized in one place, so you're not struggling to find information at the last minute. So if you've ever felt yourself kind of flipping through pages of grant guidelines to double check requirements, a checklist like this can definitely save you a lot of time and stress. So another way that ChatGPT can make project management easier is by helping you create work back timelines to stay on track with grant deadlines. So again, we've all had those moments where you look at your calendar and you realize a grant deadline is coming up. And to avoid that typical kind of last minute scramble, you can use a prompt like, based on the checklist, create a simple 1 month timeline, including time to draft, review, and submit the application. ChatGPT will break it down for you step by step, like when to start drafting, when to gather documents, and when to plan for reviews and edits. Having a clear timeline takes a lot of guesswork out of managing grant applications and helps you space out tasks so you're not doing everything the night before. Plus, it keeps everyone on the same page, especially if you're working with a team. So instead of juggling deadlines in your head and back and forth in emails, you've got a plan that you and the rest of your team can stick with. So here's an example of a 4-week timeline that ChatGPT created based on the TELUS Community Board grant, which has a deadline of April 11th. It breaks everything down week by week, which makes a big project feel a lot more manageable. So in the first week, where you can see ChatGPT has us gathering documents, completing the budget, getting the first draft and application done. And that way we've got, a good solid starting point. Then in weeks 2 and 3, it has us working on reviews and making sure we have enough time for multiple rounds of reviews and edits to keep things moving forward. And then in the final week, ChatGPT has us do a final review. It's reminding us to do a proofread of our grant. Um, it has the deadline there, and then as well, it's reminding us to save the copies of our grant application and confirm our submission. So having a timeline like this helps you stay on track and makes it a lot less stressful to meet those deadlines, especially when you're juggling multiple grants at once, which I know many of you probably are. All right, so now that you've done your grant research and you have your timeline sorted out, it's time to pick a project to apply for. So if it's a new project or event, you'll need a plan that gets funders interested and invested. ChatGPT can help with program planning in a few ways. One example is brainstorming activity ideas. So of course, it's not a replacement for professional expertise, so keep that in mind, but it can give you a good solid starting point. So for example, you could ask, what are some activity ideas for a community cleanup program? And ChatGPT will suggest a list of options. So here's an example of a community cleanup activity idea list that ChatGPT came up with when I entered in that prompt. So what's great about this is it doesn't just stick with, boring basics. It suggests some very interesting options. So we've got litter pickup challenge where teams compete to collect the most trash, adopt a spot program where groups maintain specific areas, recycling relays, and for fast-paced sorting competition of recyclables. And then my favorite art from waste, creating display art from cleaned recyclables. So these kinds of ideas can really make your program stand out to funders, showing them that you have some actual activity ideas and thought beyond just the basics of your program. And even if you don't use all of these, or you only use one, or maybe not even any, it is a good way to start and kickstart your brainstorming process so that you can build out your program and therefore a more engaging proposal. So if you've ever applied for a grant, you know that funders love to see detailed timelines for your program activities. They don't want to just know that you're planning your program. They want to know when and how you're going to pull everything off. And this strategy creation helps create a lot of trust with funders. So that's where ChatGPT can really help out. It can create timelines that map out key activities step by step, making sure your proposal looks organized and realistic. For example, you can use a prompt like create a timeline for a 6-month community cleanup program, including key activities, and ChatGPT will break everything down for you. This way, you're not scrambling to kind of figure out dates and deadlines and those timelines. ChatGPT will do the heavy lifting for you, and so that you can have a plan that looks very clear and actionable. It's a simple way to show funders that you've got everything under control. So here is a 6-month timeline for the community cleanup program that ChatGPT created. So I'll be honest, this originally was a lot more detailed. So I asked ChatGPT to simplify it and fit it on one slide so I could show it to you. And that really is one of the best parts about using ChatGPT is you can ask for as much or as little detail as you need. You can see how it breaks things down from planning and launch in month 1, education kickoff in month 2, to ongoing engagement in month 5, and wrap up and celebration in month 6. You can see it even suggest specific tasks like forming a planning committee and organizing events. so you're not stuck wondering what comes next. And the best part is you can adjust this timeline based on your organization's needs. Just ask ChatGPT to add or adjust specific activities. It's an easy way to show funders that you've got a clear, realistic strategy without sitting down, spending hours trying to figure out these timelines yourself. All right, so let's talk about drafting your narrative. One of the most important parts of any grant application, of course. So, if you've ever struggled to turn your ideas into clear, compelling narrative, this is where ChatGPT can help. So, you can use a prompt like, I have a list of information about my program. Can you help me turn it into a simple and clear grant project description? The key to this prompt is to ensure that you're giving ChatGPT the right information within your list. So remember, think of it like a calculator. What it gives you is only as good as you put in. So that means covering the basics and more. So the who, what, when, where, why, and how of your program. So who's it for? What is the impact of your program? When will it take place? Where will it happen? How will it operate? Why is it needed in the community? And you'll put all of that in a list. And then when you give all those details to ChatGPT, will it be able to turn those ideas into a cohesive narrative that funders can get behind. So here's an example of a narrative that ChatGPT generated for a program supporting mental health for at-risk youth in Vancouver. It does a pretty solid job of organizing the information and giving you a clear starting point. So if you're staring at a blank page, this can definitely get the ball rolling for you. But also here's the catch. While it is organized, it can sometimes feel a bit generic or robotic. It's missing that authentic voice, those real life stories that make funders really connect to your proposal. So that's why it is so important to go back and add those personal touches like specific examples, quotes, or a bit of your organization's story to make it feel more genuine. So think of this as a really good jumping off point, a way to save time on structure and getting your ideas down quickly. But of course, not a replacement for your own personal voice and your expertise. A common challenge when writing a grant is pulling out the key information that funders want. So for example, goals, objectives, and outcomes. It can be especially tough to spot these clearly if you're so close to your program and enmeshed in the work that you do. This is where ChatGPT can make things simpler. All you need to do is paste in your grant narrative and use a prompt like this. List the main goals, objectives, and key outcomes in this draft proposal. So you'll also need to, of course, paste in your proposal along with this prompt. So ChatGPT will scan your text and pull out those key points so you're not left guessing or overthinking it. This way you get a clear list to work from and you can see right away if your proposal is covering all of the essentials that funders want to see. So here's an example of what ChatGPT came up with when I asked it to list the main goals, objectives, and key outcomes for a sample grant. The reason this is so helpful is that most funders will specifically ask for these sections in your grant proposal. They want to see clear goals, concrete objectives, and measurable outcomes. By having ChatGPT pull these out for you, it makes it a lot easier to organize your information and make sure you're presenting it in a way that funders expect. It's a simple way to save time and make sure that you're checking all of the boxes. So, one of the best ways to strengthen your grant proposal is by backing it up with solid data and research. So, funders really want to see more than just a good idea and qualitative information. They want to see proof that there is a real need for your program and that it can make an impact in your community. And so this is where ChatGPT can help by finding relevant statistics, studies, and background information to support your case. So you can use a prompt like, for the grant, list relevant statistics and supporting research from credible sources to validate the community need for our program. Cite your sources in APA style. The two most important parts of this prompt that I'd like to highlight are making sure that you're asking for sources that are credible. If you don't ask for credible sources, ChatGPT might go ahead and give you some sources that are not credible at all. So definitely do that. Um, you can ask for specifics, so you can ask for sources such as Stats Canada or other well-known research organizations. And also, it's important to state in your prompt to ensure that the sources are properly cited so that you know where to find them and fact check them. So here's a screenshot of what it looks like when ChatGPT pulls everything together and includes supporting research for your proposal. So this can really save you a lot of time, but it is important to fact check everything that ChatGPT gives you. So start by looking at the sources. Make sure that they are credible. So for example, here we have the World Health Organization, obviously a credible source. However, we have Smith et al. And Brown and Green. We don't really know what those are, so it's important to look into that and see, is that a credible source? Also pay attention to the dates on the sources. So funders want to see recent data. So if a stat is more than a few years old, it might be worth searching for something more up to date. You also want to, if you're looking for stats to support your case in a specific community, it's good to have stats in that community. So you might want to include your community within your prompt, or potentially you want stats that are within Canada only. Another tip is to click through the original source. So you see on the bottom there, it has references, and double check that you can find the information within the source and that it hasn't been misinterpreted. And if a stat seems too good to be true or doesn't quite fit with what you know, it's definitely always worth taking a minute to dig deeper. Doing these quick checks can help you make sure your proposal is backed by accurate and reliable data that funders can trust. So you've got a completed grant narrative, but after staring at this draft for hours, of course, it's easy to miss things that could make it better. So let's talk about edits and reviews. So we're all human, we all make mistakes, and that's why it's so important to always have an extra set of eyes on your proposal. It is absolutely so important. And it helps catch any mistakes and make sure everything stays on track. But if you're like many nonprofits with a very small team, or maybe you're even volunteer run, sometimes there just isn't an actual human available to help. So that's where ChatGPT can step in. So for example, you can have ChatGPT check your proposal against the grant's guidelines. All you have to do is paste in the guidelines and use a prompt like, based on the provided grant guidelines, review the below grant application to ensure it meets all criteria. ChatGPT will scan your proposal and point out anything that might be missing or needs fixing, so you can catch those details before you hit submit. This way you can feel more confident that your proposal is complete, professional, and ready to go. And you don't need to bribe or beg one of your colleagues to do it for you. So here's a review summary of a sample TELUS Community Board grant that ChatGPT generated. So I also pasted in the grant guidelines here, along with my completed proposal. You can see we got a 7 out of 10 rating. Not bad, but of course, definitely room for improvement. What's really helpful here is that ChatGPT highlights some key strengths, but also points out some issues that could be holding our application back. So for example, it flagged that the funding request was above the $20,000 limit and that the proposal was missing a technology component, which is something that TELUS specifically really values. It can help you catch obvious issues and get a clear sense of what needs work. That way you can feel confident that your proposal is strong, polished, before you go ahead and submit it. So another way to use ChatGPT for edits and reviews is to get feedback on your actual grant narrative. So make sure that it's clear, concise, and impactful. So you can try a prompt like, please review my grant narrative for clarity and conciseness, suggest any improvements for impact, wording, and structure, and point out any spelling or grammar issues. ChatGPT will go through your text and highlight parts that could be stronger or suggest better wording, or even catch those really sneaky little grammar mistakes. So here's a screenshot of what it looks like when ChatGPT reviews your narrative. In this example, I included some intentional grammar and spelling mistakes just to show you how ChatGPT bolds those and then suggests edits. But it doesn't just stop at spelling and grammar, it also gives you a list of suggested improvements, like defining the program's main goal more clearly or including expected outcomes. This kind of feedback can be really helpful for catching things you might overlook, especially when you've been staring at the same draft for a while. It's a quick way to make sure your narrative isn't just error-free, but also clear. So even in your writing, even if you're confident in your writing, having ChatGPT take a look can help you spot opportunities to strengthen your proposal. So this sort of brings me to the end of the presentation, but before we jump into questions, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who joined today. I really appreciate it, and I hope that you found this useful. As a thank you here, you'll see I've included a download with all the prompts that we talked about today, plus some extra tips. So you can scan this QR code on the screen or access it through the link in the chat. This will automatically also sign you up for my newsletter where I share regular grant writing tips, reminders, and I also share upcoming grant deadlines if you want reminders for those. So before we jump into questions also, I just want to quickly recap a few takeaways. So first, the quality of what you get from ChatGPT doesn't just depend on the prompts that you give it. It depends on the information that you provide. So remember, clear, detailed input makes a difference in the quality of the output. So remember to think of ChatGPT like a calculator. Second, while ChatGPT can save you a lot of time, it's definitely not a replacement for your big, creative, smart brain. It's your passion, your dedication, and the years of real-world lived experience that will bring your proposal to life for funders. And finally, using AI thoughtfully can help you spend less time on repetitive tasks and more time focusing on what really matters, crafting a proposal that doesn't check just all of the boxes, but also is unique and compelling. So with that, let's open it up for questions. Feel free to ask about anything we covered today, and I'm happy to dive deeper into any of the topics.
Thank you very much, Jessica. So for the first question, could you please provide a brief explanation of how one can use ChatGPT in writing a letter of inquiry for a grant?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say just like the what I said before about the calculator, so we need to make sure that we're putting all of the information in first. So you want to create a bulleted list of all of the information that you want to include in your letter. You also might want to include details on the funder in that list, or you can also find the funder's website and paste in their website into ChatGPT, and it will pull some information on the funder. And then you can write your prompt. So based on this list, create a letter of intent for XYZ funder. And then ChatGPT will write you a letter. And then you can continue to iterate and edit it as you need. Of course, adding in those personal touches like we talked about, making sure that it doesn't, sound robotic like ChatGPT wrote it. And adding in personal things like quotes, testimonials, stats, data, metrics, and things like that.
Perfect, thank you. And then the next question, do you happen to have any advice slash prompts for encouraging ChatGPT to write in your brand voice? Is this better served in the business version?
So yes, you can do that. So what I would do is grab a few paragraphs of brand voice, of something that's written in your brand voice that you really like and are proud of. And you can paste that into ChatGPT and say, ChatGPT, please adjust the content to reflect the brand voice in this piece of content. And then you would paste it in. And ChatGPT will pick up on the nuances of how you've written that, and it will adjust its voice. ChatGPT is actually very good at doing that.
Great, thank you. And then do you have any recommendations for leveraging AI to streamline workflows?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So I think we talked about a few project management options. So you can use it to create checklists. You can use it to like review things. You can use it in a multiple different ways. One thing that you can also do, which I have done in the past and is really fun, is you can ask ChatGPT as well, in which ways can I use you to help project manage this project? And it will give you very specific information about how it can help you. So even just asking ChatGPT how it can help you can be really effective.
Great, thank you. And then we received a few questions regarding the paid versus free versions of ChatGPT. Based on your experience, when would you recommend that nonprofits invest in the paid version versus the free version?
So I would say if you can afford the paid version, I would go for it. And I use the paid version because it is more secure and more private. Um, and it also allows you, it doesn't have a limit on how much you can use it. The free version, I think there's a limit of how much you can use it in the day. And then after a while of using it, it kind of goes to a previous more primitive version, and it's not as helpful after a while. So if it's in your budget to use it, to invest in the business version, I would recommend it. However, there are a lot of really good like features in the free version, and I used the free version for a very long time before I switched to the business version, just keeping in mind a lot of those privacy and ethical things that we talked about in the beginning.
Great, thank you. And then are there any creative ways to use ChatGPT to show your organization's impact? For instance, slide decks or infographics?
So I've never actually used ChatGPT for graphics, but I know that it can do it. So I'm not actually sure. I can definitely look into that and get back to you on that question. Because yeah, I know it can be done, but I specifically haven't tried that yet. So interested to see what that would be like.
Perfect, thank you. And then how do you cite ChatGPT in grant applications?
How do you cite?
Yes, so just I believe that they're asking whether or not they need to cite that they use ChatGPT in the development of their grant application or proposal.
Okay, so that's a really good question. So this is part of the reason why I think it's good to not overuse ChatGPT. So to take what ChatGPT gives you and put it into your own words. Because if you do that, there really isn't any need to mention to the grantor that you used ChatGPT. Um, Also, some grantors are still kind of getting on board with it. ChatGPT is kind of a controversial topic still about who can use it and when and how they should be using it. So, if you do put that in your grant proposal, just understand that it might impact the decision by the grantor. Some grantors might not care. Some grantors might if they're sort of more traditional and they're still learning about ChatGPT. So I would just be careful about adding that, and I would recommend not adding it and just making sure that you're adjusting your proposal, putting it into your own words, and using ChatGPT more as a tool, a brainstorming tool, helping you with project management, and giving you a place to start.
Thank you. So the next question, how can ChatGPT help with budgeting for a funding proposal?
Yeah, so you can ask ChatGPT to create budgets. Um, so it's going to vary from project to project. But again, you would put in as much information as you can. So you would share information about the project. You would share information about what you're going to allocate the budget towards. You also, of course, want to look up the maximum funding amount for that funder and do some research on maybe the median amount that they typically give to organizations. And then based on all of that information, again, create a list because we know that ChatGPT is only as good as the information that we give it. So give ChatGPT the list, ask it to help you create a budget for the program. You can even ask it to provide it in specific formats. So sometimes I'll ask it to provide it in a grant in a spreadsheet sort of format, in a table format, because different grantors have different formats that they want their budget in. So ChatGPT is actually very flexible in that way. And so if you do all of those things, ChatGPT will create kind of like a suggested budget for you, and it's pretty fun.
Great, thank you. And then the next question, can ChatGPT assess if your organization fits the grant eligibility requirements? And what would be the best way to do that?
Yeah, so we did go over that earlier. So if you want to grab the prompts list here, you can get the prompt for that. But basically, what you do is you're going to paste in your completed grant along with the grant guidelines of the specific grant that you're applying for. And then you'll use that prompt. So I think it was something like assess this grant against these grant guidelines. And it will do that for you and come up with suggestions. Yeah.
Thank you. And then we have an individual who asked the question, wondering how to respect our privacy slash confidentiality while at the same time making it specific to our organization.
Yeah, so it's hard to give a specific answer to that question without knowing what your privacy and what your specific policies are. So I would just suggest really reviewing the terms and conditions of ChatGPT and then also reviewing your specific organization's privacy policies and seeing if it makes sense. before going ahead and using ChatGPT.
Thank you. And the next question, do you need to cut and paste everything into ChatGPT, or is there a way to upload documents?
Yes, so in the business version, you can actually attach documents. Um, in the free version, you do need to copy and paste. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then can ChatGPT turn project plans into Gantt charts to keep track of project timelines?
Yes, I believe that is true. Um, I don't think that I've actually ever done that before, but again, if you just paste in the information, tell ChatGPT you want it to create a Gantt chart based on this information, ChatGPT will go ahead and do it for you. And just like anything, we want to make sure that we're always reviewing what ChatGPT gives us for accuracy, and iterating, because typically the first time what it gives you needs a lot of edits and reviews. So just keeping that in mind.
Thank you. So if everyone is using ChatGPT for the same grant application, how do you ensure your application stands out and doesn't look like everyone else's?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, ChatGPT will give you different results based on the information that you give it. So we're not just asking ChatGPT, hey, ChatGPT, write this grant for me. We're going to give it as much information about our program, about our organization as we possibly can. So who, what, when, where, why, and how of our program, of our organization, and really ensuring that we're giving it the best equation, sort of like a calculator, so that when it comes back, it's going to give us something that is actually really unique to our program and to our organization. That being said, again, it is really important that we absolutely put everything in our own words. ChatGPT, is can sound kind of robotic. It doesn't include your personal experience and your voice. So we never want to just be taking what ChatGPT gives us and just pasting it straight into a grant application. We want to make sure that we're using it as a jumping off point and as a tool to then go and do our own grant writing.
Thank you, Jessica. And then the last question, will you please cover what is included in your ChatGPT prompts download? I believe you already covered a little bit of this, but we just have a few
Yeah.
people asking about what's included in the download.
Oh, totally. So the download has all of the prompts that we covered today, as well as some tips on how to use them effectively. Um, yeah, I hope it's helpful for you.
Thank you very much for presenting such an informative webinar. Do you happen to have any final comments before we sign off today?
Yeah, I just want to point out some of the ways that folks can contact me. So you're welcome to book a free 30-minute consultation call with me if you have any questions. If you want to talk about anything to do with grants, I would be more than happy to do that. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I often share a lot of tips and resources and grant deadlines through there. You're welcome to email me any questions or just to connect. So my email is jessica@writtenwithpurpose.com. And then you can also check out my website, writtenwithpurpose.com, where I have also a lot of resources. I have some freebies on there, some blogs and things to check out. Yeah, so I would love to connect with anybody that would like to. And again, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Jessica. I just wanted to remind everyone that you will receive a follow-up email tomorrow with a link to the webinar recording. Please feel free to share this link with your colleagues. The email will also include a survey link that you can fill out with your feedback on today's webinar. You should see a survey link pop up right here in Zoom following the session as well. On behalf of Charity Village, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you'll join us for our next free webinar, From Surviving to Thriving, 10 Essential Financial Tips for All Nonprofits to Navigate Uncertainty in 2025. You can find more information on this and all of our upcoming webinars at charityvillage.com/webinars. Thanks again for joining us. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.